Okay, friends, let's go to the Lord in prayer before we start our interesting evening. Father, we thank you that we live in a free country. Father, we thank you for the United States of America. Father, we thank you that you have given us a platform to where we can come in and discuss, we can have dialogue, and we can communicate together in a civil manner. Father, I thank you for that. I pray for our speakers, Father, that you just be with them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. He asked just wisdom. Should I have that one? So thank everyone for coming. Mr. John Wilkerson, thank you so much for making the time to join us this evening. I wrote a short introduction that I didn't want to go through. It'll just take a minute, and then I'll be joining in on this lovely great chair here. We're just going to have a very, very organic conversation. We do have an agenda. We have 7 different points that I would like to get through this evening. I told them we could either fly through it in 20 minutes or it might take us 2 or 3 sessions. So we'll do our best to dive as deep as we can and get through all 7 of those items. I believe they're all extremely important. But we'll get started with this and then continue on. So I wanted to give a quick introduction about the event and share what it is and what it is not. Tonight is not in any way an endorsement of one form of government or a damning of another. Instead, it was organized to help give me and other curious folks such as yourself a deeper understanding of what exactly a change in government structure enforcement would mean, what it might accomplish, what we would be losing, and what we would be gaining, why it's being considered, what the different options are, and to shine some light on many of the questions that will arise as we consider changing our form of city government. I am currently an undecided voter myself on this topic, which was the inspiration for organizing this event. I can see value in both our current form of government and the proposed form of government. But truthfully, if I have any wisdom in this area at all, is that I am painfully aware of my own biases and ignorance on the full depth of this issue. And I'm hoping that through conversation with our guests tonight, we'll be able to leave here a bit more informed and more confident in our convictions on this topic. Now, for what this event is. This is an event to learn, to think deeply about an extremely important, impactful, potentially pivotal topic regarding our city's future. There's a poignant excerpt from a short story titled The Hammer of God by G.K. Chesterton that I'm reminded of that I believe is worth some consideration and even meditation as we go through tonight's conversation. If you do not see the use of it, I certainly won't let you clear the way. Go away and think. Then, when you can come back and tell me that you do see the use of it, I may allow you to destroy it. Or as I've heard it paraphrased another way, before you tear down a fence, you should at least pause long enough to fully understand why that fence was put there in the first place. And that's what tonight's meant to be, is a pause, at least long enough to help us better understand what we currently have and the use of it, along with what's being proposed to replace it, before we move forward, potentially clearing it away. And with that, we'll get started with the conversation. Thank you all again for coming out. Again, if we could please get some applause to welcome Mr. John Wilkerson, General Counsel and Legislative Director with the Arkansas Municipal League, for making the trip to join us for this conversation this evening. Okay, can be good. Mr. Chairman.
Hey, real quick, if I don't, I guess I can say this again. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you all for being here. Being involved in local government for the last 20 years, this is what it's about. This is democracy in action. This is citizen engagement on these important topics. So kudos to all of you. Thank you for having me. I can tell you Fort Smith is near and dear to my heart. I was born and raised in Conway, but my family is from Paris, Rebecca, Barling, Greenwood, and then of course here and there in Fort Smith. So whenever I came to see my mom, her side of the family, my mom's side of the family, we inevitably made our way to Fort Smith. So I remember an early memory of mine is getting a belt to my backside for riding a zip line at County Hills. I know who Jimmy Lind is. I played arcade at the Central Mall, and I've been up and down Zero or Rogers more times than I can remember. I do not, however, know who Big Deer is. So if somebody can tell me that at some point during this, I really appreciate it. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this. Like I said, Fort Smith is near and dear to my heart, so to help you in some way through this, I'm honored and I do not take it for granted, so thank you.
Didn't you shake the camera? Give it up for Tim, everybody. I think we just we're good. Okay, so part one, we're going to start first principles here. I wanted to spend some time understanding the three forms of government, understanding only really two are relevant, but I thought it was worth discussing and touching on at least all three potential forms of government. So we'll start first with the one that has the most pull right now, that folks are really discussing, which is the strong mayor form of government. Some of the core characteristics, and obviously I've got my discussion points, but if you want to do an overview of that, you're the subject matter.
Sure. Yeah, so the strong mayor form of government is the form of government for 492 cities and towns in Arkansas. By the way, there's cities, there's first-class cities, second-class cities, and incorporated towns. The city administrator or city manager form of government is available to all the first-class cities, of which there are 100 and some odd. So there are 492 are mayor council, there are 8 that are city administrator or city manager. 3 city administrator forms of government, and I'll get to the mayor council here in a second, but just so you know how unique it is to have a city administrator form of government. Only 3, there are only 3 in the state: Solomon Springs, you, and Bartlett. The other 5 non-mayor council or city manager forms of government. That's Texarkana, Hope, Hot Springs, Arkadelphia, and Little Rock. But Little Rock is an odd duck. It is a strong mayor city manager form of government, which I won't tell you which way to go, but avoid that. It's really, really complicated, and it's always Little Rock. So the mayor council form of government it's not just a clever name. It is a mayor and a council, and they're very distinct bodies. The mayor, he or she, is the chief executive of the city, manages the day-to-day operations, runs the meetings, makes hiring and firing decisions for department heads that cannot be overturned by the city council, except by 2/3 vote, and signs all the contracts for the city, and really executes the budget. And the budget is the perfect way to talk about the council. The council has a power of purse. Nothing gets spent in City Hall or by the city without the city council making a decision. And then the mayor, of course, if the budget is for the police department for $100,000, the mayor has latitude to spend that $100,000 on the police department, more or less however he or she wants. So it's a council which is a very strong power of purse, the legislative branch, and then the mayor is the strong executive. And then that's the main crux of the mayor council form of government.
Okay. And one question that and I told him at any point to say if I start treading on eggshells, I shouldn't be discussing. But does a stronger democratic accountability inherently require more centralized political leadership?
Yeah. I'll say this. I've thought about this, and I've thought about this for a while ever since you called me last Tuesday. I've done my research, I went back to the law, remembering all the statutes that I should remember, did some calls to cities that have made this transition from city manager at least to mayor council. By the way, great question. I'm going to answer your video as I get going here. No city in the state of Arkansas has ever made the transition from city administrator to mayor council. There have been 2 in the past 35 years who made the transition from city manager to mayor council. That's Maumelle and Fayetteville in 1992 and Maumelle in 2001. The reason I frame it like that, or the answer to your question like that, is when I talk to people that were involved in those changes, one said it was great to make the change, one said it's bad to make the change. But universally, and I'll look this up too, so I'm not telling you this is pro or con, it's consideration, but probably the #1 reason that I see in the things that I read, in talking with people with mayor council form of government, it is a more direct line to, it is a more direct democratic line to the city through an executive. And in a city administrative form of government, it's sort of spread out by the way between the 7 board members. So, I don't want to go on the record and make a political statement that it is the only way to have a direct connection, but I will tell you that is a common theme when you think about mayor council is that direct connection to an executive.
Yeah, and another one that I had the flip side of that coin was can highly professionalized governance sometimes weaken public identification with civic leadership and accountability, and I think that was the point that you spoke to there.
Yeah, the other thing that I hear that I'm going to read it because I'm not pro-con. I want to emphasize that. Number one, I don't know the answer to this question. Number two, you do not want me involved in this. I do not live in Fort Smith. I love Fort Smith. I wish the best for y'all. I'm here to help you navigate this in any way I can. But this is your decision, not mine. So back to the the things to consider. Another thing that I hear is that with an administrative form, there is this, the mayor embodies the electorate because the mayor is elected by hired by the electorate, and that may be lost. The argument is that may be lost by having a professional person. There is another side of that, by the way, which I'm sure we'll get to that. But yes, that's a common thing that I see on the literature that I've heard about this.
Okay. And then, again, this is just high level, so we're going to go deeper into a lot of this stuff as the night goes on. So next up, we've got the city manager form, and as we discussed before, I don't want to spend too much time on it, as that's not really relevant to today's conversation. But if you can just give a quick overview of the city manager form.
City manager and city administrator are very, very similar. The key distinction between the two, and there may be some others, but the key distinction is the role of the mayor. In a city manager form of government, there are board members, of which one of is elected to be the mayor by the board itself. In a city administrator form of government, the mayor is elected at large. And so in the city manager form of government, the mayor has no veto power over anything. The mayor does have a vote on the ordinances, resolutions, motions, et cetera, et cetera. And that is the key distinction between city manager and city administrator. The rest is more or less the same.
Okay. And then our current form, city administrator, which most of us should be hopefully fairly familiar with. But.
So, city administrator, you're going to find this odd. My recitation of mayor council forms of government is actually fairly limited. It's fairly limited. There's not a whole lot of case law or statutory law on the mayor council form of government. It pretty much says in the statutes what I just said. Council does the controls the purse, and the mayor is the chief executive. And there's some things in there, here and there, that are talked about, but it's fairly, it's malleable, I should say. Now, I've had most experience in my career with mayor council because there are 492 of them. With that said, though, I'll say that city manager, I have had probably more experience with them pound for pound. You know, I've obviously helped Fort Smith, litigated on behalf of Fort Smith, litigating on behalf of Solomon Springs, one of Solomon Springs board meetings. I've never taken the bar, although I know the city administrator there. Hope Hot Springs, Texarkana, I worked with them since Little Rock, of course, as well. That's a very interesting hire. City administrator is different than mayor council in the sense that the statutory, it's much more lined out in statute. And so in the city administrator form of government, the city administrator is just that. He or she is an administrator of the city. He or she is the day-to-day operator of the city. Signs contracts, executes the budget, makes hiring and firing decisions, but all of those duties, every single one of them, I think it's every single one. By the way, real quick, this is municipal code in Arkansas. So, yes, I am an expert in municipal law, and there's probably one person, that's my boss, who knows it better than I do, and maybe on one hand know it as well as me, but this is all the stuff that we have to know. So, I say all that to say that there may be gaps in what we're talking about that we can't cover because this is everything that you need to know about running a city. And there's actually another volume too. It's a smaller volume, but still. So in a city administrative form of government, as the code says, the board makes all the decisions as to what role the city administrator has. So the statutes say the city administrator may do the following with the board's approval. And it's that list I was talking about: hiring, firing, signing contracts, doing this, doing that. And I did some research on this. The term city administrator, there's 181 code sections in the Fort Smith City Code that mention city administrator. So it should tell you how robust Fort Smith, and this is true for Solomon Springs as well, and probably every other city manager or city administrator form of government. The city has lined out everything that the city administrator is supposed to do. The board is both the legislative body and in the statutes referred to as all the powers of the mayor, that the mayor would have in a mayor council form of government. So the legislative body is both the executive and the legislative body. For that's mildly overselling it, but not much. The mayor holds a different role in this in this form of government, the city administrator and city manager, is a city administrator form of government, the mayor can veto things. The Mayor McGill does not have to vote on anything, but Mayor McGill can veto something, and that can be overturned by 5-2 or 5 votes of the board. He cannot veto personnel decisions, which is an interesting point to make here, and I'll stop being so specific because I know I'm getting lost in myself. But the Mayor McGill cannot veto a personnel decision. So the personnel decisions rest with the board. And remember, in a mayor council form of government, the mayor hires and fires department heads, and this is where it gets murky, and the mayor, because he or she runs the day-to-day, probably can hire and fire other personnel, but that's not the law exactly said. The law's really open about that. So it's more malleable in the mayor council form, city administrator, it's much more strict with the law, is how it works.
Yeah, one of the most important distinctions in Fort Smith's current structure is that executive authority is intentionally distributed rather than singularly centralized. And I think that's a really important point worth considering, is sort of, that has its own pros and cons. That has its own values, that has its own drawbacks. Having that executive authority distributed in the manner that it is. Is that more unique to city administrator than the other forms?
Oh, yeah, it's certainly more unique to city administrator than mayor council. Mayor council is very, it's very clear in practice that the mayor hires and fires personnel in practice. But if you ever ask me, John, show me the law that says the mayor hires and fires personnel, I will tell you, funny enough, I just reread a text. I was FOI for some communications with a mayor up in Northwest Arkansas. And as I was looking for it, I read a text, and he said to me, and I literally just read it, he said, John, can you point me to the statute that allows the mayor to hire and fire personnel? And I said, no, I can't. But in practice, that's how it works. So it is more centralized in that the mayor is the day-to-day runner of the city. In the city administrative form of government, if you lined it out the way Fort Smith has done it, then at least you know where everything goes, so to speak. And that efficient, more efficient, less efficient, I don't know the answer to that question.
So you use the word you've used a couple of times now, malleable, with the board's discretion at sort of defining the scope of authority that the city administrator has. How malleable is that?
Very. The city administrative form of government?
Yes.
Very malleable. The board could say the city administrator is going to do one thing only, and do nothing else. Or the city administrator, the board could do what they've done here, which is to say in 181 different places in the code that the city administrator does this, that, and the other. The city administrator does, you should see the list of things that the city administrator does here. It's a lot. So they're both malleable, except in a city administrative form of government, it's very clear as to who makes the decision and how you have to line it out, because it does have to be done by ordinance. Mayor council, it's clear in practice-ish who does what, but when you get down to brass tacks and law, there's not as much clarity.
So we're going to have a lot of light bulb moments this evening, I have a feeling. So I'm just going to pull on those threads a little bit, wherever those moments do come up. A sort of continuation on this thought, and we've got a lot to go, so we'll move on after this one. But the city administrator model appears to reflect an attempt to balance two competing governance impulses, the desire for both professional administration and visible democratic leadership. So it seems like a very unique, and I'm interested why so few other municipalities, towns, cities have chosen this form when it seems like logically, at least on paper, like this division of executive authority makes a lot of sense. And especially now malleable the board can be informing the roles and responsibilities of the city administrator. It's balancing both professional administration with sometimes an individual elected has no background in public governance. And that can be a hamstring to some folks. And then on the other side, you have this visible democratic, obviously not strong mayor, but you've got some of that in there that can have some influence. So I'm curious, just again, high level, why have more cities not opted for that form of government? So what on paper, that does sound pretty good, like a good balance.
I've thought a lot about that question since last week.
I just invited him last week, but it's very short notice, so.
I don't know. I think one, it was just the first way to do it, and city administrator, city manager came later on in the code. I think it's also the president is a strong executive, the governor is a strong executive, so it makes sense to have a strong executive at the city level. With that said, I think there's a certain, I ran the number of cities over a certain size in the country. I believe the majority are city manager form of government. I think we're the only state that's city administrator, by the way. So I think in a city of a certain size, there may be a majority. And so the size of the city became an interesting focal point in talking through this with folks. And they knew, by the way, when they did 92, I talked to somebody who lived through it, and he said, well, the size of the city, it just made sense that we would get mayor council. And I said, why? He goes, well, because we have enough money, enough budget to hire a professional administrator to assist the mayor. On the other hand, the argument contra to that was we're not big enough to have a professional running the city, so we're relying on a mayor who may or may not have any experience in this. Now, whether we're the population line really lies, I don't know. Farmington, for goodness sakes, they're 12, 15,000 people. They have a city administrator, they have a mayor, but then they have an executive assistant, so to speak, and they call her the city administrator. So I don't know why cities have done it. Maybe we're just more populous and we like to make decisions and we're elected leaders. I don't know how about it.
I mean, that's one of the warnings with a pure democracy is sort of mockable. And so being able to logically sort of filter through the passions of this flavor of the month is always a concern to me in any form of government. So that just struck me as a very interesting balance. But the fact that you mentioned the assistant mayor can play that role once they get affluent enough and they have the budget to be able to support that, I think that was news to me. That's another aha. That was news to me as well.
By the way, you mentioned something. I think another key distinction here is that the mayor is elected and that mayor is in office for 4 years. Cannot be gotten rid of. Well, you can recall, but I can tell you that's a very unique process, and you don't see it a whole lot. With a city administrator, that city administrator can get hired on Tuesday and fired on Wednesdays if they report once. So it is much more, it's done. Now, there's also contracts involved in Solid Springs, their city administrator contract. But under the statute, the city administrator can be gotten rid of whenever at will, again, assuming there's a contract in place, can be gotten rid of. So another thing to consider on the mayor's side is that mayor is there for 4 years. Good, bad, or different, it's just a consideration.
And one thing that I've been thinking about as well is, to that point, every 4 years, city administrator can be hired and fired. What seems to be more sustainable? It seems like hiring and firing can be done more quickly. The candidate, you're searching different talent pools under different time frames. You don't have a 4-year restriction on a city manager, administrator, they don't perform. Granted, you're looking at a limited scope of who you can afford, who's interested in that area, the social context and all that of alluring people. But it seems to me a change would be easier under the city administrator than under a mayoral form. However, it also seems that frequent changes lead to obviously more government interruptions, more civic unrest. Like, is there any insights into that sort of dichotomy of those two worlds?
Well, you make a really good point. I like the NFL. And the average career span of an NFL running back is 4 years. It's about the same for a city manager. Their lifespan is fairly short. I know Carl was here for a long time. And Philip Patterson, Solid Springs, was there for a long time. So it can have be sustained for a long time. But it can be, it seems to be, based on what I'm seeing across the country and in the state, it's a 4 to 5 year lifespan for a career as a city administrator for one city.
So as a recruiter by trade, that's what I do. I head talent. So the idea of going out and finding somebody and vetting them and wining dining them and making sure that they really fit the mold is interesting to me, because you can pull from anywhere really to find that talent. Right. And it just seems like you're limited to, on the other flip, with the mayoral and the mayor is extremely necessary. You need the institutional knowledge, somebody that understands what side of town is what, where the growth's happening, somebody that's been here, played, the arcade at Central Mall. You have to have that, regardless. But when we're talking about city day-to-day management operations, you can pull from a professional competent, somebody that went to school to study for this stuff and has some experience doing just that. Are there any cities, municipalities, outside of Arkansas that have maybe really figured out a secret sauce of how to find people to come in and operate it and walk that balance at all? Or is this just part of the struggle of democracy?
Yeah, I don't think there's a secret sauce to it at all. But I mean, your point is well taken, and I mentioned too about that mayor having that, it's easy to see the connection that the mayor may or may not have. Although with that said, I see a lot of mayors across the state that are not from those cities either. Now, they're going to show up on a Tuesday and they're elected. They've usually been there for 4 or 5, at least 4 or 5, 10, 15 years. But, it's not, I don't see across the state that you have to live here your entire life to be mayor. And some of the best mayors I've ever met were ones that showed up to a town. The mayor of Crossing, Crystal Marshall, she's from Texas. Her husband was from Crossing. She moved to Crossing 8 years ago. She wanted to do more with her city. She went to the city council. 3 years later, the mayor passed away, unfortunately. She became interim, and then she's in her second term now as mayor. She's done a phenomenal job. So it kind of gets both ways in that respect as well.
Yeah. So I think maybe something that would be relevant would be the hybrid structure sometimes creates ambiguity around executive authority and public accountability. Is there anyone historically we can draw from that's navigated that tension well?
On the city administrator or mayor council?
City administrator, when around the executive authority and public accountability, because typically if our mayor, say, doesn't have city administrator powers, it blurs the lines of accountability for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it lies with the board.
Yeah.
And the board is, ultimately the ones, they're the boss. They make the decisions on who the city administrator is. They ultimately, the buck stops with the board. And that is full stop, the buck stops with the board. Now, I've thought about this. I'm curious as to your thoughts on this as well. And I think it's something to consider. This is what I don't know. We talk about mayor council as you have this one person to just blame for things. The quarterback gets all the blame, the quarterback gets all the glory. Here you have 7 members, and 3 of them are at large. 3 are at large. Yeah, 4 by ward, 3 are at large. And then, of course, you like the mayor. And I think it's something to consider, is it better to have a central person that you can vote up or down on? Or is it better to have all 7 that if you don't like that person, either the at-large or by ward, it's better to go after and effectually change that way. I don't really answer that. It does seem easier, of course, to just go after the mayor. But again, the mayor's there for 4 years, and the board member is too. So I don't really answer that question. It's something I consider.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Everybody hates all the politicians in DC, but they keep getting reelected. It's the wildest thing, and it happens everywhere. Where even if people are frustrated with their own government, it doesn't seem like change comes that a lot of people claim that they want. So maybe having one person is easier as far as electing that out as opposed to 7 at a time. With staggered elections and things like that. Again, I see benefits. I'm a big fan of distributed authority. I'm not a big fan of one person having full executive in any form of government. But down at the city level, maybe it makes a lot more sense. You can be more responsive quicker.
Well, here's something to consider, though. It goes back to the fuzziness of the mayor council form of government, and it goes back to personnel decisions. And this is something to keep in mind as well. Again, I cannot point to a statute that says the mayor has the authority to hire and fire personnel. Department heads, yes. He or she has the authority to hire and fire department heads. But down the line, it's not clear. Again, practically, it has worked out that way, but it's practically worked out that way in every city that I deal with in mayor council because they've been mayor council for a long time. What I don't know, and I think this is another thing to consider, I don't know what that looks like in 2029, 2030, when this would go into effect, assuming 29, January 29. I don't know what the transition looks like. And so I say all that to say that it is spread out between the executive and the legislative branch, but the legislative branch and the city council form of government has so much control over the budget, but then it's amorphous as to what the city council can do after that. I have had situations where the city council will tell the mayor, you cannot spend more than $1,000 without our approval. And the mayor calls and says, that can't be right. And I say, well, yeah, I think it is. I've had council say that the mayor can't hire and fire anybody. And the mayor, like the mayor texted me, says, that can't be right. I don't know that it's not right. The law doesn't say it. So again, it's more amorphous in the city council form of government. And I would be curious to see what 2029 looks like if y'all go down this path. That's a transition point that I don't know.
Well, we're gonna discuss that as item number 6, so I'll start thinking about it. So part 2, moving on to part 2 now, you guys go with us? Okay. What problems were these systems that we just covered? Specifically, were they designed differently to solve specific problems?
Okay, so I had a guy I talked to. He was there in Maumelle when they made the switch in 2001. And he's all for city manager form of government. He was super upset that they changed to mayor council form of government. And I said, hey, what is the advantage to city manager form of government? By the way, there is, like I said, there's a distinction between city administrator and city manager, but because historically all we have to work off of is city manager, that's why I'm saying city manager. So I asked him, you made the switch, you didn't like it, why do you have city managers at all? And he said efficiency and professionalism, et cetera, and then he goes Kansas City. I was like, Kansas City? He goes, yeah, the mayor of Kansas City, 1900, was run by the mob. So they said, he's got to move on. They switched to city manager form of government. I don't think anybody's run by the mob in Arkansas, by the way. But I thought that was an interesting point.
History in Hot Springs.
Well, yeah, it's very yeah, I love Fort Smith. It's so cool over here. I read a book, by the way, about James K. Polk. When he first came into office, Fort Smith was the western edge of the United States. It was out, it was Seattle and San Diego. And one of y'all taught me recently, because I said, Fort Smith is such a western town. And they said, no, we're a frontier town. I thought, oh, I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was less than Dodge City were the gateways to the west, or like the Gold Rush.
Yeah. I mean, we're Chicago, obviously, left off.
So you skated around that question really well. Did we have an answer?
The mob, yeah, I got the mob.
That's fine. Were they designed out of a different vision of local governments, or were there specific needs that these things evolved out of?
What I could put together, and I'm not an expert on this because I wasn't around this past, but what I understand happened is that it was a need for a more professional type of day-to-day governance of a city. And so I make the mob joke, that's what he told me. I make the mob comment to highlight that was a concern in Kansas City generally. How true that is, I don't know. But I think what happened with city manager, city administrator, again, from what I've gathered, it was just a need for a more professional and efficient. Efficiency is everywhere in everything around. All about efficiency. A more efficient and professional day-to-day running of the city. Leave the policy decisions to the board and let the day-to-day person. Another thing is outside of politics. Get the politics out of that job. Again, that is something to consider. I'm not saying that's right, wrong, or different. That's just what I've been researching and reading up on it here.
Well, let's step on some eggshells. Can you get politics out of the job if it's an elected position?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Okay. Heaven is coming one day, then. Then it'll be a theocracy.
Yes.
All right, so we'll move on. Not a lot more beyond that, but I guess what problems were these systems designed to solve? I'll read it. I like your idea about the mob, though.
Yeah.
I'm a big conspiracy guy, so I'll look into that one.
If there's any monsters in there, by the way, I'm sorry. I'm going to set your toes.
Didn't mean it.
Yeah.
Part 3, which is probably what brings us to today, is why cities begin these conversations in the first place. Now, we were talking about this a little bit before we started. What was it, 2 changes of governments that happened in Arkansas in the last 35 years?
Good.
So, and I was telling him, I run a transitional employment program, and I coach a lot of these people about how to go get jobs, how to handle interviews, and things like that. And one of the things that we discussed when we talk about interviews is interviews are infrequent, high-stress events. Almost by definition, it's very, very hard to be good at those. They're not, you can't go to a batting cage and get reps in. These things come very, very rarely, typically, and they're pretty high stress. And I assume that's a decent analogy for a change of governance. They do not happen very often. There's not going to be a lot of veterans that are extremely seasoned in undertaking these because they happen so sparingly, and they are high stress. And so I think it's unfair to ask you too much about this, given that it has only occurred in Arkansas twice in the last 35 years. However, I am going to ask you about it.
Sure.
So, why do cities begin having these conversations in the two examples you have in 35 years? Maybe the other ones that just haven't pulled the trigger on it, but they're chewing on those thoughts, and there's some local interest around this. What do you typically see that causes these conversations to surface?
Frustration. Frustration with the existing form of government. I heard that from Fayetteville, I heard that from Maumelle. There's another city whose mayor council who's considering going to city manager, and frustration. It's frustration with the current system, and it's frustration that the city is not doing what the citizens want. That was it.
Okay. Frustration.
Frustration. And by the way, there in both of those examples, there are specific issues that were the source of frustration. So it wasn't as much as general frustration in the city. There were specific issues that created that general frustration in the city.
So I assume every city has its frustrations in perpetuity. We're all humans, we're all very different, all very unique, have our own agendas, what we would like to see from form of government to color t-shirts. We're all very, very unique in that way. So apart from, when the frustrations get to that level, it's only happened twice in 35 years. What are some resolutions that, maybe some cities or folks can undertake to help alleviate some of those frustrations? And not saying that's the situation we're in, but I am curious. What are some things that can be done? Because as we also discussed, the change of governance is in no way a silver bullet. It comes into its own beast when you do that, and you have another set of problems because you always, leaders, right? It comes down to leadership and leaders in any capacity, in any form of governance. And so that's an interesting question to me that it's only happened twice in 35, but I can't imagine we're the only city that has been very, very frustrated with leadership, probably for good reasons, that EPA mandate is not a fun thing to deal with, to name more than many. But what are some ways that cities engage in these issues when these frustrations come about, if so few actually go all the way across the finish line of changing that form of government?
I think it's a great question for y'all. For all of you that were here 10 years ago when this happened, I know Director Bill, I read an article that back in 2016 when this was, not that it made it on the ballot, I think it made just a petition sign. I'm curious as to, from 2016, it didn't take, it didn't switch to mayor council. What did the city administration do to alleviate those concerns that clearly some of y'all had, and maybe some of you in this room. So I'd be curious and I think that's something else to reflect on, is when this was attempted in 2016 in Fort Smith, did the city do anything to alleviate your concerns? And is there a way to make, I don't know what the next step is if this doesn't play out the way that the supporters want it to. I would think that I think it's without question got the city's attention. Everybody who's pushing this, and rightfully so. I think we mentioned a silver bullet, and there is no silver bullet to government. I know that, except one, and that's civic engagement. And I don't say that because you're here. I say that because it's true. You being involved in your city government is the silver bullet, and it is too often in my job. I have been involved in deals that are. I was at Clarksville the other day talking about a data center, a major thing coming in Clarksville, and one person was going to talk about it. And it had to be a good turnout of people, so I'm not going to accumulate, but I've been involved in city council meetings where one person is there, or two people are there. And so to see this level of engagement, it heartens me, no matter what happens, yes or no, good or bad, then at least there's that civic engagement, because I do think that's what, if I were the city, and I'm not, I would definitely take away from this, and I gotta thank the city, I know the city's listening, you had a study session on Tuesday. So that's what I think would be the outcome of this, that,
It's a very diplomatic answer.
well, I try.
So,
I didn't say sorry to the model, I tried.
I had a thought here that essentially summarizes what I was trying to communicate, which is when communities begin debating structural change, are they reacting to flaws inherent in the government system itself? Or are these debates often symptoms of broader frustrations around trust, leadership, accountability, responsiveness, and civic direction?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that specifically.
Yeah, I just wanted for the people.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, that's a good question for y'all. Is whatever the frustration is it inherent to the form of government, or is it inherent to the way in which it's handling things? I don't know the answer to that question. You know, that's a great thing to think about.
So my follow-up, I put POSIWID, which for my tech friends, at least Ken here understands this. The point of the system is what it does. So you can create this really exotic system that is supposed to bake pizzas, but every time you turn it on, it kills a cat in China. You've created a system that kills a cat in China. That's what you did. It doesn't. The point of the system is what it does.
Yeah.
And so I think to some point, the point of the system being the city administrator, the city mayor, whatever it is, some of those frustrations may be inherent in that system because that's actually what it does. We talked about the sort of diffusion of responsibility among the executive between city administrator, mayor, council board, and the bottlenecks that occur.
Right.
And I keep coming back to that thought that the point of the system is what it does. And I'm wondering, one of the reasons I was curious about what birthed the forms of government we have, the 3 forms we're discussing tonight, is what, because I don't think, clueless people put these things together. I don't have the hubris of the present to think that I'm smarter than the people who came before me. And so I'm very, very curious why that was put in place, why we went that route, why the purpose of the system is what it does, why are we experiencing these bottlenecks, and was it created so that we don't have these quick whiplash type decisions in elections and we fall prey to the passions of the day, so that's really what I'm trying to wrap my head around.
That would make sense. Well, yeah, but again, the mayor's every 4 years.
Yeah.
So the whiplash can only occur in 4 years. The city administrator can occur, every other day. It won't, obviously. I mean, there's no way they were the city administrator in a month unless he or she does something.
We've had vacancy for a while.
Yeah, right. So what I would be curious, and I think that's something to consider as well, what is your interaction with the city government? And I say that not asking you what have you done. My question is, in the mayor council, I know what you did. It's easy. You see the mayor football game, you say, Mayor, you messed up. Or Mayor, you did great. And it's a focal point. I know who I'm going to go to. And I know who I'm going to yell at. I know who can get my question answered. And the mayor is that person in cities. A good mayor, I should say. A good mayor is that person. That good mayor will, if you've got a sewer leak, or your toilet's backed up, and you're like, I think it's the city that did this, you go to the mayor, and the mayor says, all right, Tony, he's the sewer superintendent, what's going on? Go check it out. And that happens. Does that happen in this city? I would assume it happens too. But what is the point of contact? It's obviously the board of directors. Is your way of addressing government concerns with the board of directors, is that it's different than the mayor, obviously. Is it better or worse? I don't know. That's to me how the system works for the citizens. It's something I've never lived in. I've always lived in, I live in Little Rock. I guess that weird hybrid. But I'm curious about that.
I'm very curious about it.
By the way, that's the question.
That's right. That's probably why it's on the list. So now we're moving on to part 4, which I don't ever really, I think this is maybe just an understood, but not ever really discussed. And this we may be stretching the level of your expertise here, but I think it's really, really worth discussing, and I'd be curious to hear through your professional experiences and feedback you might have here, specifically to the civic ecosystem. And by civic ecosystem, the quality of the city it hinges on so much more than just the mayor, just the city administrator, just the form of governance. That obviously very important, but it hinges a good city people are drawn to, they talk about. It's got so much more than just the board government that most people, if it's operating well, you don't even think about it. It's the other stuff.
Yeah.
So it's the nonprofits, it's the universities, it's social services, it's business leadership, it's county relations, philanthropy, media, public trust, institutional cooperation. What are some things, or are there things, that any of these forms of governments excel at in the civic ecosystem that maybe are hamstrung in another form?
I don't think so, because the mayor, in a mayor council form of government, the mayor is the one that does the day-to-day operations. The mayor is also the figurehead of the city. Here, Mayor McGill is not just a figurehead because he has that veto power and because he presides over the meeting. So he's not just a figurehead, but he is largely, I thought about this equation. In a mayor council form of government, a good mayor is probably 65-35, 65% administrator, 35% figurehead. Here it's different because the Mayor McGill has less authority than the mayor council, or mayor council. So I think the figurehead aspect, the person that makes the connections to the university, to UAFS, who makes the connections to the bakery district, who makes the connections to whatever's going on, is still going to be the mayor, whether it's in this city or in another city, a mayor council city. Now, how that works at the city administration level, when the mayor brings back an idea in the city hall, I don't know how that works, obviously. But again, to your point, the connection point between a city and those civic institutions, it's going to still be the mayor.
Okay. Well, that's good. We can go to part 5.
Is this a comedy hour, this one?
This is comedy hour.
Had a good
I
job.
prepared a few jokes for the occasion. Part 5 is real world transitions and case studies. Again, it's going to be a light book of case studies. We've got 35 years as we've already discussed. And then we're really going to get in after this, part 6 and 7 will probably take most of the time that we want to go to keep us on tonight anyways. The rest of this is really just to set the stage for those points of discussion. So on the real world transitions and case studies, what actually happens when cities decide to change their governmental structure, but those tasks?
Yeah, again, to your back games example. By the way, the joke you told me was how many board of directors does it take to square a light bulb? I'm just kidding. You didn't.
You'll never get the answer.
That was a joke. That was my joke.
I had to try to solve it, we don't have that. It's a joke. Yes.
So when it happened, I understand, when it happened in Monmouth, I'll take the Monmouth example. And again, Vermont, just remember, this is from someone who did not like the change, did not want to change the mayor council. He said it was bad because the mayor that came in did not know how to run a city. And all of a sudden, the staff members inside the city hall were left trying to explain to the mayor how a city runs, basically. And there was an example that I was given that, Mayor Bill, whatever his name was, came in and somebody he knew had, I forgot what issue, maybe it was a drainage issue of some sort. And it was, the guy had said, well, the city's property is draining on my land, it shouldn't be draining on my land. And the mayor, to my point earlier, the mayor will go find somebody, went to the city hall and said, look, this guy's, our land is causing the drainage problem. And the city administrator, the city staff said, that's not our property. That's not our property. The mayor did not even know whose property belonged to him. Now, I'm not saying that is a reason to do either one. I'm just saying that was an example that I was given. Fayetteville, however, the person was very adamant that this was a good idea. He said that once he was elected to the first round of council members, and they went in and they hired somebody professional to help run the city, and it worked out just fine at Fayetteville. No real hiccups. I also think politically some of the political issues had died down in the new council, or had been dealt with by the new councils. That helped too. But again, it's two stories. One, hire somebody to help. Everything worked out just fine. Two, we had a mayor that didn't know what he was doing, and it made things tough for the city staff for the next year or two.
So you're telling me we have two examples, one was bad, one was good,
Yes.
we're back to square one.
Back to square one, yes.
Have fun and work tonight. And I mean, that's the interesting thing, right? Is there's not a large body of work and experience to draw from on this to navigate it, which again is why I'm really grateful to be on tonight to discuss this, because it is important, and there's not a whole lot of competent, experienced, seasoned veterans that know how to navigate this change well. So it just needs to be aired out, give serious thought, consideration, open dialogue, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Can I say something real quick? So when I watched the study session on Tuesday, one of the questions I was asked of Colby, the city attorney, was, I think I forgot who it was. One of the board members said that we need to make a decision on salaries, we need to make a decision on this, that, and the other. And Colby said, for purposes of the petition or the vote, the answer is no. And the answer is, there's something you don't really have to make a decision as to how this is going to go here, there, whatever. It is, however, a decision that has to be made. And the transition with existing city staff into making those decisions to make that transition, that's going to require a lot of study, a lot of effort, a lot of your involvement in this. It is going to be a very heavy lift. Does changing the form of government mean city staff, it's a complete overhaul? No, obviously not. The city, I am biased, I do obviously love Fort Smith. I've seen a lot of good things. So there's a lot of things you can say, well, that's good that the city's been doing, we'll keep that, and then maybe some other stuff that doesn't work as well, you shelve that. But the point is, making those decisions, seeing how the transition is going to go, that's going to take a lot of effort. And again, if it's the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do. But that transition is going to be, it's going to be challenging. This is a major deal for you all. And you all know this, that's why you're here. But it's major, and it has a lot of thought that goes into that transition once the decision is made, or if the decision is made.
So changing Fort Smith's form of government, I'm just going to summarize what we said, really coherent, I think. Changing Fort Smith's form of government would not merely change symbolic leadership, it would fundamentally alter how executive authority is distributed, how operational responsibility is assigned, how the power flows between the board, the mayor, administrative leadership. Under Fort Smith's current structure, executive authority is intentionally fragmented and collaborative, which again, I don't know that I'm on, but that's just me. However, not very responsive, and a lot of complaints from folks about getting things done and the direction and bottlenecks and inefficiency and everything else. So the transition strong mayor government will significantly centralize executive authority into a singular elected office, which brings us to the conversation you were just touching on, which is the transition itself becomes a civic event. And this is where we're going to spend, I think, the rest of the conversation is discussing, okay, the vote happened, voters supported it, we're now looking at the change. Now let's discuss that. What comes after? So now we've got the transition, and effectively it becomes a founding political moment for a city. The implications are huge. The stakes are extremely high. Somebody has to be over that transition. And this is what you and I were discussing earlier, because I think this is something that I'm wrestling with, even coming down on either side of. I don't feel okay on either side of it because it is so serious. So thank you for coming to help me feel okay about this. Once that happens, somebody is going to design, within the dictates of state code, obviously, design our new form of city government. And a big concern I have is, I know a lot of folks are not happy with our current leadership. Chances are that current leadership is still going to be at the helm during this transition period. An idea I pitched to you, I don't know if it's possible or not, but if we get there, any mayor that runs should also run with their design for what their city governance structure would look like. And that should be vetted, candidates should be voted on based on that, as opposed to, popularity contest type route. Because, again, the stakes are extremely high, and whoever is in authority at the time of this transition gets voted in, they have, to use the word again, malleable they've got some autonomy on really structuring perpetually future governance in Fort Smith. And that's a huge responsibility, and I always say a constitutional convention I'm terrified of because I don't think anybody is as wise as the founders were. And again, that's just me appreciating wisdom. I'm very nervous at what that means for us. If we open that up, redesign, who's over that process, what guardrails are in place, who has ultimately to say what the future looks like, and how much of that conversation is going to be open, how many people from, I don't suppose citizens are voting on every single point of code that the city is going to organize and make its new structural reality. So walk me through this whole process here. How does this unfold?
I want to make you real nervous because we talked about this and it just dawned on me something. They can do all they want. They make the change, we're all set up for 2029, and that new council can get rid of all of it. And there's nothing that can stop it. And nor should it. It's a council, they get to decide what they want. So all the best laid plans could just be thrown aside. Is that going to happen? Probably not, obviously. But I think I don't know the answer to this question because it's so unique. But I envision what would have to happen is that the new mayor, because you're elected one this year, right, in November, right? And so the new mayor would have to be at the helm of shepherding this. The board would shepherd it. And Director Katsavis made a really interesting point because the conversation became about how do we make all these decisions? And she said, we can sit down in one day and hash it all out in a study session. She could be right. She could be wrong. I think she could be right in the sense that, honestly, you don't have to do anything. The state statute says the council has the power to purse, and the mayor is the power to fire department heads. And just say, you know what? We're not going to do that. Well, you got to go through all this too, of course. But we're just going to let it ride out. And so, yeah, you could get it done in a day. Can you make all the decisions in a day and really sit down and hash it out? I don't know. Maybe. It depends on kind of the depth that you want to go in. So she could be absolutely right. And I don't doubt that she has a plan in her head, or I'm not speaking for her, but I assume that she's thought it out a little bit, thinks we can do this in one day, and maybe so. But you could also spend weeks, months, years, because you're going to have the time to do this. And it really depends on how granular you want to be. I think you can go through the code of ordinances in Fort Smith, and the thing is you have to strip out all the city administrator language, and you can't just put in the mayor, because the council cannot take away or really give authority to the mayor. So you have to go through the entire code and decide where you want the mayor, where you want the city administrator. All that will go back to the mayor, basically. But then you're left with, well, no, remember earlier I said I can't point to anything that says the mayor does this, and this in the code, in the Arkansas code. The council could go through and say, you know what, we're just going to replace city administrator with mayor all the way through. Now, that can't be done that easily, but they can do that. Or they can just strip away the city administrator's ability to review permits and say, we're now going to allow the public works director to review permits and do that. So that's just the tip of the iceberg here. I mean, you really need to look through all 181 code sections of the Fort Smith Code to decide who you want to do what. You could, again, just throw up your hands and say, the mayor will do it, and the council will have the power to purse. But then you may be walking into a conflict with the council and the mayor. I don't know. Again, this has never happened before in this city administrative form of government. So, to answer your question, I can see it going a number of different ways. And all of them would lead to a good result, I have no doubt. And ultimately, civic engagement, like I said, the silver bullet is civic engagement. So I would hope to see, when they will, to Katsavis' point, they're going to sit down in a study session and open a public meeting and hash this out. And so this will not, I do not get the impression at all that this will be done behind closed doors. Director Katsavis was very adamant, as she should, in doing this in a public study session, which is the way it should be done. Now, whether it can be done in one day, I don't know, but it will, I have very good faith that it will be done.
Is it exaggerated, hyperbolic, maybe a little over the top to assume that depending on who wins that mayoral election at the time of that transition, that we could be looking at candidate B to radically different forms of city government, depending on A or B and their governance philosophies and their agendas and their.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah, I mean, but that's true for any mayor and council form of government too. The mayor's running.
So no more so than a regular mayoral turnover.
You just have the extra layer of, you may want to know, again, I'm not saying you know that you want to know this, but you may want to know what is that mayor thinking for the next, the mayor and council form of government. I think that would be a consideration you may have. But again, if this mayor candidate says, I don't think we need to invest as much as we do in ball games at Ben Guerin, and this person says, we need to expand Ben Guerin, maybe, have more pickleball courts or whatever.
It's county.
Is it really?
It's county.
It's county?
That's you were doing really good until that.
Yeah.
Creekmore, say Creekmore.
Yeah, Creekmore. I passed by Ben Guerin, took the back way to get to Greenwood basically, so I just thought it's a city.
I think there's a quasi little thing going on with water, so I don't need to talk about that.
Yeah, I don't know what Caribbean, I don't know what you're talking about, so.
That's not.
But anyway, that's a good example, is that what do you want to do with the water spot? Do you want to do more with it, do you want to do less with it? Like, that's common.
We're trying to figure that out.
Let me know.
Okay, so you kind of addressed some of my concerns there, because again, to the point of what I kept alluding that transition to is akin to, say, the Constitutional Convention, like it's all up for reformation, and whoever is elected at that time gets to sort of choose their own adventure for what the future of Fort Smith looks like, its government structure, and to your point, every 4 years, a new mayor can come in and maybe bring it back or provide more. So I guess one of the things that I was really concerned about was really just, it can be corrected in 4 years under this new thing. So whatever happens in this transition isn't going to lay a bedrock that we can no longer go back and adjust during that transition when we just determine what that new government structure looks like. That's still malleable.
Yes, it is, yeah, because you obviously change the form of government again in 4 years if you wanted to, or assuming that it changes when it changes.
Once is enough.
But I'll say this too, back to the city administrator form of government, the duties of the city administrator, because they're so defined, those can be changed too. And that's, again, that is not a pro or con, it is a consideration that because the board has so much control on how the government works across the board, then, actually, it's kind of, I'm thinking this through now, back to that question, would you rather have one person go yell at, or you want 7 that you can work with, or yell at? That board can tinker around the edges on things, or make wholesale changes either way, and they can do that tomorrow. They may call a special meeting tomorrow and make some wholesale change, or tinker around the edges based on what you need. So that's something that is not as easy to do in the mayor and council, except that because the mayor has so much authority, the right person may yell at him at the right time in Ben Guerin Park, which is not the county I'm wearing. And the mayor said, this is going to change, and I'm going to change it tomorrow. And that's something else, that's direct, that's tangible, that is an easy fix, or an easy thing to do. But again, the same can be said on the board of directors side, except you spread it out across 7 people. Or at least 4 before the vote, yes.
So what guardrails or what involvement does the state or organization provide during that transition time to advise council during that formative period?
The state wouldn't do anything, well, except the AG's office would probably be willing. Now, that's not to say, by the way, that if you see something as you're going through this process, or as Representative Crawford here, this is a good point, if you see something in this process, and you're like, that's not really clear, or that should be changed, she at the state level can help effectuate some change going forward. But as far as how to navigate this process, other than maybe asking the Attorney General's office for some advice here or there, the state's not going to have a big role in it. With that said, I will, and the municipal league will, because the municipal league is here to help the city of Fort Smith. And if y'all make this decision, put it on the ballot, and you vote to change, then I expect that city administration will call and ask, how's this going to work? And at that point, and I'll be thinking about it until then too, we will do everything we can to help you through this transition. largely because I care about Fort Smith, but I'm also curious. This is a fascinating civic issue. I mean, it's just really fascinating, and I love thinking about it. By the way, I talked to state senators yesterday, Senator Bryant up in Bentonville, or in that area, and I talked to him about it, and he was engaged. He said, "Hey, what's this? How's this going to work?" I thought, keep asking questions because we're not sure either. And so everybody that hears about this is fascinated by it, and I am probably leading the charge with the fascination factor.
People were fascinated by Ebola too, it's not necessarily good. But,
That's it, I'm here, glad you're
interested. How can a city ensure continuity of direction and operations during the institutional transition here? What does that look like?
Citizens.
City. How can citizens be ensured the city will continue without the disruption?
Oh, well, yeah, I thought about that too. I don't know that, when you flush your toilet, the dirty water's gonna go out, and you turn your faucet on, the clean water's gonna come in. I think the trash is gonna be picked up, y'all do, the city does the trash, right? You don't contract it out? Okay. The trash is gonna be picked up, IT is gonna work, administration is gonna work, it's all gonna, I cannot imagine that it's gonna be this huge dip in services. I would assume it's gonna maintain just fine.
Who has the authority during that transitional power, so when we're going from administrator just the board?
It's the same people, yeah, nothing changes until, by the way, and I meant to mention this, and I got sidetracked. The other big difference, and I want to talk about it when we talk about the transition and staff. The other really big difference I think you need to keep in mind when it comes to city administrator form of government is that there is not a city treasurer, city clerk, or city attorney in the sense of an elected official. If this change happens, the city attorney becomes elected, assuming there is an attorney in town that wants the job, I'm sure there is. The treasurer becomes elected, and the clerk becomes elected. This is another interesting part of this that may not really change a whole lot.
So it sounds like this is really your, like, accounting makeup with the judge.
Oh, yeah. The sheriff is not as elected, the chief of police is not, sheriff's elected, the chief of police would be. The clerk duties are to sign ordinances and get them on the reports and keep the city seal. That's it. That's all the clerk does. And I always say that from the clerks, and they get mad at me. I'm like, that's what the state law says. But then the council then dictates by ordinance all the clerk is supposed to do. So that change, that probably wouldn't be a huge change, except that the clerk would be now elected. City attorney, kind of the same thing. I mean, the city attorney, I've talked to folks about this. The city attorney would be more separate than a hired attorney would be, perhaps. But I will say this: I have utmost faith in Jerry Campbell and Kobe Rowe. They've done a fine job. Lawyers have an ethical responsibility for their client. I don't know that having an elected one I don't know what the difference would be necessarily, but that's the thing to consider. The big one, however, is the treasurer. The treasurer's the big one. The treasurer's duties are to keep up with the municipal accounting code. And that's one of the provisions in here. There's a lot to know about municipal accounting code. And it's not, if you're an accountant, and there may be some in the room, it's not like you can walk into a city and know exactly how to account for a city. We're cash flow basis, where other things that make sense to accountants I don't get, but the treasurer ends up being elected. Now, in Fort Smith, that may not be a problem. I know you've got plenty of great people here, I'm sure. But in a smaller city, that's really the part of the mayor council that we've seen has been challenging to navigate. Because a treasurer does not have to be an accountant to be hired. The treasurer does not have to even have a checking account to be hired, to be elected, I should say, not hired, elected.
Can you guys change that law?
Well, we
have a checking account, what is that?
Yeah, it's at least not to add. That we've seen as a problem in other cities because that is something that, again, you now put the power of or the responsibility to keep up with the accounting laws into the hands of the treasurer. Now, as we all know in city government, when the Arkansas legislature calls you to question why you violated the accounting law, it's the mayor that shows up. Now, he or she brings along the treasurer sometimes, but it's the mayor that shows up. But that is the person that is now elected that has the sole responsibility to abide by the municipal accounting code. That's a big consideration I I think it's worth considering.
Let's double click on that for a second. The city org chart, how much does it change between city administrator and mayor, strong mayor?
See, that's the issue, that right now in Fort Smith, it's, you know, Jeff, and then he has the personnel. And that's decided by city code. In the city council and mayor council, it's the mayor, and then it looks like this, except it really doesn't, that's what I was saying, it's kind of amorphous. Now, the mayor does get the authority, like I said, to hire and fire department heads. Now, I should have defined department heads earlier. Department heads are, in Fort Smith at least, would more than likely be considered, obviously, the police chief, fire chief, HR director, parks, finance director, water superintendent, water director, sewer director, and now the mayor has the authority to hire and fire every single one of them. And if he or she does fire one or hire one, the council can override that decision by 2/3 vote. So that org chart it could look the same, but again, if you get into a weird conflict where the council says, no, we don't want the mayor to have hiring and firing over the folks who aren't department heads, that could be a conflict. I don't think that it will. I mean, I would advise not to get into that, but it's always a possibility.
We always follow the advice and probably be having this conversation. Man, that was the main points of this. I really wanted to end on that. I think the last one we had was the transition of power, reorganization question, what that would look like, how the power would be, executive authority would be fundamentally redistributed, what that org chart would look like, what that makeup would be. Are there any other closing points on that you wanted to touch on before we open it up to Q&A for a minute?
I'm just embarrassed that I've never been here as a county, so I apologize. I'm a fraud. I've actually never been to Fort Smith, it's my first time.
I've made work of mistakes. Well, now's the point of the evening that we will open it up to polite, thoughtful Q&A. Please no attacks. I'm getting tired of saying the evening. Most of them be for drama anyways, but. Yes, gentlemen,
You know, as I've listened to you tonight, so I've heard words when you're talking about the city manager, like professionalism, cooperation.
efficiency.
That's right, I can talk pretty loudly. I'm sorry. Anyway, so you talk about things like cooperation, collaboration, he keeps things running smoothly day to day, but I think we're missing something here. If we were to just step back a minute and say, instead of talking about a city, let's pretend Fort Smith is a business, a factory, and we make these chairs. Sorry about that. So we make these chairs. So where's the city manager? What's his job? He's on the floor. He's the shop steward, right? He's making sure that the things are flowing smoothly. We've got inputs, we've got outputs. But he's not the one who's going to have a vision for the company. He's not the one that's going to be thinking, where do we want to be 10 years down the road? That takes a leader, not a manager. That's my point.
Florida, yes, back here, man. Hustle, Tim, hustle. Yes.
So we're speaking about item number 3. You said, I was in the study session, so, we're listening, y'all, we can't speak in the study session. We have to listen to them, right? We don't really have to say so about it, and that's what we want. And also, for instance, for example, numerous things, we put it on the record. I never seen any email saying that this mayor has to work directors to make sure this is taken care of, or assign anything, make sure anything's done. Nobody does anything, there's no check and balance. And so I just want to bring that up, have us, check and balance. It's leadership and listening. And we don't have that. So I just want to make sure that you understood that. Study sessions, we don't get to speak, so they're not listening.
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah, I didn't mean to imply that, I said it's in public, but yeah, that's a fair point.
I didn't mean to imply that, listen.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I will say, we have a public comment period at city council meetings, I guess, that's something I've heard of. Yes.
He's coming to you, sir.
I'm Steve Sherman, practiced law here for 50 years. My question is going to be about the city attorney position. I've dealt with Dr. Wood, Jerry Canfield for years on some of the different issues. That firm's institutional knowledge is invaluable to the city. My question is, in other cities that you mentioned about mayor, city council, form of government, the city attorney is elected, correct?
Yes, but the city now can appoint under 50,000 population, so yeah, in certain cities you can still appoint, but most of them are elected.
So the cities are fortunate over that population. The city attorney is elected in that form of government, correct?
Assuming there is somebody that wants the job of the city, yes, which I assume everybody.
Well, here's my question. Let's say I wanted to run for the city attorney after I'm retired now, after 50 years of practice. And I'm not gonna be interested in doing all this litigation, learning that book.
I blame you.
Well, you know, I got elected. So what happens when I say, well, I don't want to do that? I don't want to be paid. And I assume the city council will determine the salary for the city attorney.
Yes.
So is your question essentially what happens when one of these newly elected positions is incompetent and negligent in their role if they can't be hired or fired?
Exactly what happens.
Nothing. And and this is happening in Jacksonville right now, and it's public, so I'm not speaking on terms of tea here. But the city attorney had an extramarital affair with a Jacksonville police officer. And then that has led to accusations that she's not doing her job. It's very public. And the mayor, I mean, everybody's talking about it in Jacksonville, as if it's the gospel. I'm not saying it's true or not true. I'm not suggesting that one way or the other. But assuming it's true, you know, the mayor called and said, what can we do? And I said, nothing. She's elected, and you can recall, but that's a whole big process that takes a lot of time. So it's really, that's just the elected city attorney, and that's the end of the story.
So my point of bringing this up, isn't that at least one factor that we as citizens making a decision on this? Because there's not many cities in our class one category that has this issue. And it would seem to me that that's one significant issue that citizens should have to be mindful of. That we really should be in a position of electing a city attorney. I think we should.
By the way, that's true for city clerk, treasurer, and city attorney. So all three of those would be elected in this, once they're in office. Oh, by the way, just to add something to this, the salary you mentioned, salaries can't be changed in the middle of the term. So if they're doing nothing, they're paid $97,000 a year, they're paid $97,000 a year for doing nothing. And so you are stuck with the same salary too. And that's across the board. That's true for mayor, council, well, true for all elected city officials.
Thank you.
So, a question to follow up to that, because there is some accountability when we have elected officials that are purposefully not succeeding in their job or purposefully neglecting their job. We have some state repercussions that we can activate towards that. We have recall elections that we can do, which is significantly different than what we can do for an administrator that is supported by the board, but the citizens don't feel good about it. So this actually does have a democratic process in place to check on a person that's not, is that correct?
Yeah, you're correct. There's a recall. Yeah. It's rare, but it certainly is there. And you're also right, the citizens don't have a direct recall of the city administrator.
I was just gonna add that you were saying that the recall, you know, is a long process, all of that, but it is the citizens' duty to do that. And that is the proper protocol to follow, is to get rid of them. when Carl Geffin was here, we had no, there was no reports.
That's a fair point. It's a consideration for sure.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm just so happy to see everybody show up tonight. It's great to have the residents here. Sorry, I am terrible on my phone. I understand Mr. Sherrill's point, and I think he's a very, very intelligent man. But we also elect the President of the United States. He does not need to have any certain educational background. And I think that what people are forgetting is Fort Smith has a lot of educated, very intelligent, capable people to be mayor, to be city attorney. And I think what we're seeing right now is a lot of frustration with the community because we have put our faith in the form of government that it is now. And to be honest, we've been let down. We go and we speak and it falls on deaf ears. And I think that it's time that we have changed. Mr. Geffin was in office, the board of directors had the opportunity to remove him from his position, and they chose not to, which, we have higher sewer rates, we have higher water rates, we had a consent decree disaster, and we're continuing to have to suffer from those things. So I believe 4 years is a lot better than 9 years. Thank you.
This is a genuine question here. So are you saying that without that ability to go talk to somebody directly and have that person, because to your point, again, like I said, if you catch the mayor at the football game and you're like, hey, this is a change, he can go back on Monday and make the change. And so that distribution of responsibility and accountability, that's what you're concerned about.
Yes, I think so. I think that right now what we have is we have 7 people that, there is really no listening to the citizens. We have 3 people that somewhat vote the same, we have 4 people that vote the same, and they're never gonna cross those lines. So it feels like the citizens' voices do not matter. And I think that during Geffen's employment, there was a culture change within our leadership. And I think that we're also still seeing that, and no one wants to take accountability for it. So, in my opinion, we need someone to take accountability. And the people want to be able to make the decision on whether we keep that person in power or we vote them out for 4 years. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I really appreciate it, because I'm really curious about this. Because I was really eager to hear your perspectives on this, because we're all in this together, and y'all are from me, but that's interesting, thank you.
And to be honest, I originally was not sold on the change of government. I really had to do my due diligence and read and see what other cities and citizens were saying about the forms of government, but I think at this point, we need to put it back into the citizens' hands. Thank you.
Is there any other questions out there? Oh, we have one right.
Gentlemen, I just want to thank you for putting this together, sitting up there and answering some questions, going over everything. My question to you guys, I've been trying to do a little research into the history of this. Fort Smith, historically, before 1967, was a mayoral style government. After that, obviously, we switched to city administrator. I was wondering, what was the causes behind that? I couldn't find too much information behind why the city of Fort Smith made the switch over. I was just wondering if you guys could shed some light on that.
I looked into it, I also could not find any active links that I came across that allegedly had that information. I hope to discover that information, and I'll share it as soon as I can, but I also haven't had any luck tracking that down.
Jerry Canfield is an institution around here, I think he showed up in the city in 72, and y'all made the change in 68 or 70, so, I mean, if anybody would know who Jerry Canfield, but he wasn't here at the time.
Somebody get Jerry. Yeah, I did try to find that preparation, guys, it's good.
I asked them that very question when I saw them in study session. So I asked them the question, looking at it, he was here in 1970, which happened in 67. So that was 3 years prior. From some old timers that I've talked to, these aren't the most reliable sources necessarily, but there were a lot of people pissed off in Fort Smith in the late 60s because of the integration of schools. And one lashing out against our government is what more than one person has told me, and they just wanted to see the people that weren't fighting that integration. They were trying to punish something. I don't know that that's true, but that is something that I've been told by more than one person.
I'll check that out.
To pivot a little bit, we've been focusing on essentially changing to the mayor structure, but my question is actually more on the board. How unusual is it for a board to actually be paid? Because I'm talking about the issue of the board right now where they're not doing their job, but to be realistic, they're treated kind of like a little fire department board, where they're not supported and they're supposed to be doing supposed to lunch breaks, but how unusual is that for actually a paid position where we're hiring those individuals as actual professionals at that level, instead of pivoting to one potential fail point where I hear y'all saying, we're not going to be represented right now, that's the mayor, but what's the guarantee that the rest of us are going to be represented by that mayor? So what's the opportunities for actually looking at the board and getting them to be paid professional positions?
I cannot imagine a scenario in which we as a country decide that we're gonna appoint professionals to be on the board. I don't think that's, now some boards, I'm sure there's some stipend, there's some not that boards are paid, but to your point, a lot of council members or boards are unpaid, and it is doing their lunch break. Now, I'm not saying that's Fort Smith, because it's a much bigger city, but that's fairly common across the state as well.
John, I think one thing you said, really the only point I want to make tonight is, we can switch governments to the cows come home, but if we don't have civic engagement, and we don't have folks who are paying attention, then we're gonna get the same result we've always had. That's the bottom line. And I think that's one of the positive things that we're standing on the street corners, talking to folks, that we do see the engagement. Now we've got to see engagement in venues like this, in board meetings, and if we don't, we'll continue down the same path, whether it's strong mayor or city administrator.
So Joey and I go way back, and we're both very passionate about our lawyering, but also passionate about local government. And while we're not always on the same side of the coin, we're on the same coin, and which I really enjoy that. So I called Joey about this to really kind of drop the bow down on what's happening. And I called several people, not necessarily just Fort Smith, but across the state, and they all made the same point you did, Joey. They all to a person said, it does not matter what form of government you have if the citizens aren't engaged. And the council board, whoever is not listening, that can't work either. So those two things have to happen. So you're absolutely right, Joey. And I hope that this is just a continuation of civic engagement for all of y'all.
I have another point of weakness that I think, or potential weakness with the city administrator form of government that we see in Fort Smith, and that is we have part-time board of directors who are paid very little for their time, and they have full executive and legislative function, and it's only made less than $10,000 a year, and they have to give up every Tuesday, every month. They have to give up all the time beforehand in order to get this. How do we expect a person paid less than $1,000 a month to give up days of study in order to effectively be a governor, to effectively execute our laws, to effectively understand? They depend entirely on the staff, the administrators to prepare things, these people to prepare these things for them. And not to say that the city council won't have the same kind of situation with this, but having that mayor that is accountable and who delivers information to the board, to the voters, I think creates a clear accountability point that you don't get in administrative government. For example, water slides, we all love to use this example right now, so I'll use it. The administrator decides this is a good deal for the city, we'll present it to the board gets that information, they make a decision based on that information. It turns out to not necessarily be correct information. So that person isn't accountable to voters. He doesn't really face that much for it. The board may be pissed off, but the board's going to cover for themselves and just keep spending money because the board voted for it. They committed to that mistake, so now they're going to double down on that mistake. This isn't just water slides, but we see this over and over and over again with our administrative government. Having the mayor elected independently, I think will break up a part of that and create a very big check and balance that we desperately need in a city. And I think a lot of us can see that.
That's an interesting point. I never thought about that until just now, that they're paid as if they're just the legislative body, but they're actually doing the executive work as well. It's a really interesting point. Yeah, thank you.
I actually lived in Fayetteville, it was my last year of law school, and Fayetteville went to an area.
Oh, okay.
There was other things going on there with slumlords and other issues that were being addressed. But it happened kind of like this, that people got tired of not being listened to and being ignored. And that the city had developed into basically two factions. And there had to be a change, and it turned out for the best. They have a great mayor now, by the way.
They do. Mayor Potter's amazing. Can I ask you a question, if you don't mind, since you're there? Back to the question you had about the process. Did the overhaul of the people make the change, or did the overhaul of the system of government make the change?
It was the people.
Okay.
I mean, it was very, and it started going at like meetings. People were at, every city, county, every city meeting, they were having at the library, at the university, and the rooms got packed.
Yeah.
And the more people got angry, and the more certain groups tried to buckle down and bury their heads in the sand, more people got angry and they wanted to speak out.
So I want to step on eggshells, and I'll give it a shot anyway. I'll say this: for those of you that are supportive of this, which feels like there's a fair amount here, if this doesn't work out, I hope that you don't walk away thinking, well, it didn't work out, we're done. I'm not going to speak for the city, of course, but I know they're listening. And just because this path doesn't work out, does not mean you shouldn't be at the city board meetings. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be in public at the microphone asking these questions and asking hard questions. So I hope that y'all realize that no matter which way this goes, to Joey's point, the civic engagement, it needs to continue to really effectuate the change that we want in the city.
The one thing that I did want to say is I kind of got the idea that some mayors may be ineffective because they don't have the experience. I have lived all over the country, and I've had a horrible mayor in Rochester, New York. Look her up, Lovejoy, horrible crook, is now in prison. But I also experienced Kathy Hochul, who I did not vote for, not my politics per se, but she was a great mayor for Buffalo, and she is actually an outstanding mayor for New York, or outstanding governor, and I absolutely hate her. But she listened to everybody.
Yeah.
And she would tell you, I'm gonna make you mad. But she was one of those who would go out and do whatever it took to find an answer. And she was not experienced. She didn't if of the two people in her family, her husband ran the business. And he had all the experience, but she learned it on the fly and just went through the stratosphere as far as politics, because the people love her even if they don't like her politics.
Yeah, and there's countless examples of that across the state. Molly Warren, for instance, in Fayetteville, she wasn't in government. And I talked to her very routinely. She is learning, and you can feel that passion that she has for her job. And the passion for the job, whoever made the point back there that Fort Smith is full of smart people, you're absolutely right. But it is something to consider when you're making a vote. It's their experience and their passion, among other things, of course. Yeah, that's a very, very, very good point.
So I just have a couple of comments on your comments about the board directors being very little. I hope they're on the board, not for the
pay, but to make this city a better place to live. Again, not for the money. Also, on our board of directors, we have several of them who have been reelected unopposed. That is a huge problem. We need engagement from our community to get out and run. Yes, so those are my comments.
I appreciate that, Megan. I got involved 3 years ago and started going to meetings, and since getting involved, I was really amazed that not a lot of people were involved. I saw things on social media 3 years ago about the water rates, and I thought me and my wife would go to the meeting and drink more. You know, there might have been 15 citizens there. I missed a handful of meetings in 3 years. At times, it's been very disheartening to go to those meetings because there has continued to be low turnout. I'd encourage you to get involved. It's going to take you getting involved, whether this stays the way it is or change to really happen. It reminds me of a scripture that says, "My people perish for a lack of knowledge." And if you get involved, you hear things that you might not have heard. We hear all kinds of things in the news and even on social media that doesn't actually represent what's being told. But when you get involved, you kind of hear things that you might not have heard otherwise. And that's really important to share with the community and with your family and friends, because this is a great city. And I believe there's a lot of opportunity here. And I believe that y'all that came out tonight are came through the city, no matter which way you go with both. You're here, you need to stay involved, and I appreciate y'all being here tonight.
All right, we've got time for two more questions.
So I want to read a little bit about that. So in 1968, the state of Arkansas started changing federal safety regulations for natural gas pipelines and oil gas pipelines. And that's our government thing. In our city, attorneys are ready to handle oil gas bills. And so are they protecting the oil gas, or are they protecting the city? Well, I want to know. Because this is all these things change, and it's changed for special interests, this is why our government changed. This is protecting people, that's where it is. I went out to Colorado in 2021, it was a lot of mines, filled for 2 weeks, and I spoke to someone from EPA today, she said, Kristen, it's all about oil and gas, and we learned about oil and gas. And I learned about oil and gas. And that's what it's about, because they control the permits, everything. I brought this to permits people, nobody does anything about it. And all of them talking about our city. They're not in our city limits anymore. They're all in our city. That's what I like to say, and that's what I like to tell you what I think about. Thank you.
Behind it.
As we're making our way, I know I mentioned Representative Crawford, but I now see the Representative Richardson here. And I've said this to the board before, but y'all have an incredible delegation at the state capitol. So I just want to highlight them, and I appreciate that. Good to see y'all, of course.
Good evening. My name is Kenny, and I hate to admit this. I haven't taken much advantage of the city government in the last 25 years. Now that I'm retired, I'm getting more interested. I can tell that there's a lot of sentiment for the change in government. I guess I do have a question. We have the city administrator. It seems like most of the bad things are given to towards that city administrator. If that's the case, they're not doing a good job. Where they will stay when that fire back through all the expense and elect people for 4 years. It can't change for 4 years unless it's critical or corrupt or something like that. But I guess that's that question. Why are we rushing into this when there are other avenues that would be less costly?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great question, a great thing to think about.
We've got 2 minutes.
I'll make it short. I think I can answer that a little bit. So I think what happens a lot of times, and I think it's human nature, is that the board relies on the city administrator. There's a relationship that is developed with that city administrator. And because of that relationship, sometimes the board is blind to the administrator neglecting or making bad decisions on behalf of the city. And so with the mayor, the people are the ones that get to decide what they see and how the city is running. So I do understand 4 years is a very long time, but like I said, it took the board 9 years to relieve our previous city administrator, and that was because he made a terrible public statement, not because of his job performance, which he should have been fired for a long time. Thank you.
But hang on, Jim, before we go to you, buddy, we've got time for like one more, so if somebody had a question that didn't get to ask yet, I'd like to go to them, please.
Appreciate that, thank you very much. So, one thing in common we've heard tonight from a number of folks is involvement and representation. You don't want representation, I think, and that has changed at the city board of directors meetings in a very effective way. And so I think we want to continue that as a community. Now, I've worked some elections, and if you look at the turnout at our elections, we don't even come up to the state average with some of our elections in terms of how many people turn out. So it's really a shame, you know, when you get less than 10% turnout at an election, I think that speaks to me, and I'm sure it does to others, is embarrassing. So I think we, as citizens, we need to step up to the bat. And a few folks here have mentioned how turning out at the city board of directors meetings has made a difference. Now, I think one of the things too that I question for you is that representation. Right now, I've got, with regard to board of directors, I've got the at-large board of directors I can communicate an issue with, and I also have the one for my district, right? But if we go to the city council mayor, you talk a lot about what the mayor could do. My chances of getting a communication with the mayor are pretty slim. But what about the city council? And so as far as representation, for me or anybody else, what are our opportunities to get to the people who can make the difference with the two forms of government? And then I'll just shut up.
Well, that wouldn't change a whole lot. You still have your council member to go to. Springfield, by the way, has 2 positions per ward. Some are, I'm not sure how many are elected by at large. Some cities have at-large elections, but they're still by ward. So the entire city can vote on a ward election. So you'll still have that. So you'll still be able to go to your city council member, just to call it a city council member and not a board director.
We'll wrap it up there. We'll hang around and go for further conversation. Thank you, everybody. I was concerned that we wouldn't have a turnout, and you guys were awesome. Thank you to the representatives, Crawford, Jeff, I saw you back there from the city is listening, they're interested. Thank you to everybody. Thank you very much. We'll do it again.
Thanks, everybody. And if you know Nick Karen is listening.
And thank you to John for coming tonight.
Can I ask you just a real basic question?
Yes, ma'am.
I couldn't hear you when you introduced yourself, and I was wondering if you would give me your names and your